Welcome to your 12-minute HR lesson. Today we're going to talk about the Hulk, the law, and you. Normally, this goes without saying with all of these, but particularly this one, whenever I'm talking about law, I'm going to talk about a law in terms of broad principles. It's very easy for someone to go, but in this situation X, in this situation Y. So therefore, this comes with a disclaimer. This does not constitute legal advice. This is a disclaimer for all of these podcasts. There's always a situation in which what I say is wrong. They are only broadly right and wrong in some circumstances. So, disclaimer, this is not legal advice. This is just about your mindset and your thinking about how to deal with these situations. I can't keep doing this. I can't do this every time, but I am going to have to do it one more time. I am going to have to talk about superheroes. And I'm going to talk about superheroes because the moral of the story is that you have a superpower. And what you need to learn is be prepared to use it, but not to use it recklessly. That's the lesson at the end of this. This is your superpower. Use it wisely. So let's talk about the Incredible Hulk. This arguably applies to all, but this works to the Hulk the best. They've made about 4 versions of the Hulk. This is something that they keep going back to, and there's a reason for that, is that Hulk is the most interesting because there is a real tension between Bruce Banner and the Hulk. The Hulk is impervious, almost infinitely strong, almost undefeatable, but on the other hand, extremely dangerous, an absolute rage monster. A well-written Hulk movie, and they're generally well-written, play with the question of, yes, he could go Hulk to get out of the situation, but what does that mean? What are the consequences of going Hulk? Who's going to get hurt? The Edward Norton version of the Hulk really played on this quite well. He's in hiding. He's a threat. The question is, if they unleash this power, what's going to be the cost? Is it going to be worth it? What's the damage? Even the Mark Ruffalo version in the MCU and in the first Avengers movies, that's a common thread. If the Hulk comes out, what does that mean? What are the consequences? What's interesting in Infinity Wars is that he doesn't want to come out, and you want him to come out. Hulk is the solution to the problem, but he can't be drawn upon. But then in the last one, in Endgame, he's just there. So that's a whole different thing. But the interesting question that the Hulk comes to us is, how do we use our power carefully? Should Bruce Banner just go full Hulk? If so, when? And if so, what? So let's talk about a real, actual situation. This was a couple of years ago. I was working for a different country. I was working in-house, and there was a little bit of a drama in another division of the business that had gone a bit awry. And so I came in to assist the situation. And essentially what was going on, it was a performance management process that was dragging on. It was a performance management process that was almost getting to the point of escalation where the person was talking about bringing in a lawyer. It had been going on for months. They hadn't got to the point of giving a warning. Everything was being discussed. Nothing was being resolved. Meetings would end up with no resolution. And then they would sit down and meet a week later. That process would get dragged into 3 weeks. The review period for the PIP needed to be a month. But on the other hand, if you spend the first 2 weeks deciding and agreeing what the criteria is, when does the clock start? You can't start the clock if you haven't agreed what the goalposts are. So that was the rough situation. So I came in, and this is what I think the root cause of the problem was. The mindset that people were getting stuck in, both the employer and the employee, is that everything needed to be agreed. And if things weren't agreed, then we can't move on. We can't move on with the PIP if we don't agree what the criteria are. We can't agree what the performance requirements are, what the objectives are, what is the employee's responsibility or their team's responsibility, nor could they agree whether or not he was succeeding. And my immediate feedback, having looked at this, is why are you trying to get agreement? I've seen many HR practitioners, many managers unconsciously trying to head towards agreement. Likewise, I've seen many employees and many of their representatives implying that they need to agree or discussing as if that is a thing that we are trying to get to. This is your superpower. At the end of the day, you only have to listen. You don't have to get agreement. Let me expand on that. There are things within an employment relationship that the employer has a unilateral absolute power to do. There are very few circumstances in which anyone can actually stop them. You cannot go to court. Now, this is within New Zealand law. It might be different overseas. You cannot go to court and get a stay. An employee cannot go to court and say, stop them doing this. Appeal to a higher power and say, do not do this. It's just not something they can do. The closest we have is that they can ask for reinstatement, which is essentially a reversal, but that's not a hold. The employer can essentially barrel on in and do whatever they like. That is a superpower. Well, I'm going to stop using the word superpower. I'm going to say power. That is a power that we have that we often forget that we do, and people try to pretend that we don't. Now, probably not consciously, probably subconsciously, because this is essentially how these things work. We generally run by consensus. Most of the time, we want people to come along with us. We want to, as a group, do things with everybody on board in agreement. A good leader, a good manager, wants to bring people along. They want other people's buy-in, and so we seek buy-in. But there are some decisions we don't need their buy-in. It's almost patronizing to try and get them to agree that them being dismissed is the right thing. It's like we're trying to ask them to forgive us. They shouldn't forgive us, nor should we expect them to do so. So let's do something I like to do now and then. Let's tease things out in the grey. Let's find the grey area in which it's a little bit less black and white, because it's easy to talk about things in the black and white. Let's find the grey area and talk about how this applies. And let's talk about asking people to do the tasks and responsibilities of their job. When you signed a contract or a variation or a promotion or what have you, you give them a position description and it says that is what they need to do. If you are asking them to do something outside of what they have contractually agreed to do, they have a right to say no. But everything within that job description, you can enforce that. You can say, no, you have to do it. It's in your job description. A lot of the tension that we see in employment relationships is people pushing away from the parts of their job that they don't want to do and pushing for the parts that they do want. And then there's a question of how well. We also get to unilaterally decide how well, what is good and good enough and not good enough. That's something all within our scope to do so. And this is the type of thing in which everybody has an opinion. The employee will have an opinion as to whether or not that's achievable. They will have an opinion, and they're not wrong to do so. Like, they're not being unreasonable. They know their job better than you. And ideally, we do want agreement on this. We want them to be able to buy in and go along with this. But if we cannot agree, then we get to overrule. And essentially, that is the question. The power that we have, the superpower, if you like, is the right to overrule on a disagreement and say, I understand what you're saying, but this is how it is. This is your takeaway. At the end of the day, you can just say, this is how it is. We've discussed, we've heard you, we've listened, but this is the decision. This is the scenario. And not get drawn into the trap of seeking agreement. And it is a trap. It's not a malicious trap. It's not an intentional trap. They're not being sneaky. They're not being devious. They're just running to the norms that we are all subconsciously used to working within. That is that we all get to say, we all get to agree what we do as a group. But when we can't agree, someone's got to make the decision. And the law doesn't say you have to get agreement. The law says you have to do things reasonably. You have to put everything on the table. You have to give them a chance to have their say. You need to listen to what they say. You need their feedback. The courts have never and probably will never take away the unilateral right of an employer to end things when they think they need to. Even if they take you to court, unless it's reinstatement, the best that they will receive is recompensing for an unjust decision, but that decision is still made. The decision still stands. What is your superpower? That you have a right to do things unilaterally. You can end employment unilaterally. You may wear a significant cost to that, but you can always do it. One of the things those of us in the industry providing employment law advice, or providing HR advice, sometimes we say, look, you can do whatever you like. It's just a question of how much it's going to cost you. You need to listen, and then you need to move on. How do you know? What is the major sign? And this is probably a useful takeaway for you. How do you know when is the right time to just say, look, this is just how it's going to be. This is what we're going to do. And that is when you're starting to hear the same things again, when there's nothing new. We've been through this. I've given you my answer on this. I know you don't like my answer on this, but unless you've got something new to say, let's move on. And this is just how it's going to be. My apologies if that was a little bit rambling. My apologies if that was a little bit circular. My apologies if you just kind of go, okay, I've got the point. You're just repeating yourself. It's hard to know when I'm reiterating and re-going over in a circular way just to really bed it in versus just absolutely grinding the same point into a paste. As always, thank you for listening. If you want to check out our courses, if you want to check out our services, have a look at us at pragmatichrm.nz, and I'll catch you on the next one.